All right, so we are on time. I think we'll just wait for 1 more minute and see if we can get somebody else rolling in, and then we'll begin. I'll just go ahead and have my water meanwhile.
I thought you had tea in there for a moment, Harshit. Disappointed.
It's all right. I'm more of a coffee person, but I've had too much caffeine today, so it's okay. I'm just sticking to water right now, letting it sink in.
That's fair enough.
All right. I think we can get started, Dileep, right? I'll just,
sure.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just share my screen in that case. Can you confirm if my screen is visible?
Yeah, I can see that.
Awesome. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and welcome to another Lambda Test webinar. Today, we are going to talk about how you can incorporate and empower digital transformation initiative using automation testing on the go. And before we get started, I would just like to take care of a few housekeeping items. This webinar is recorded and it will be shared with you over your registered email address. And you can also find the full recording of this webinar over our YouTube channel. In case you are not already subscribed to Lambda Test, make sure you go ahead and do that. You'll find recordings over previous of our previous webinars over our YouTube channel too. Lots of learning there. We conduct webinars around test automation, tutorials, and in generic about technologies, ever-changing technologies and trends that are happening in the QA world, right? And having said that, in case you have any questions while we're presenting, feel free to drop them in the chat, Zoom chat, and we'll be picking them up one by one towards the end. We'll have a dedicated Q&A round where we'll try to answer as many questions as we can, which will come from your way, right? And that's it. And today I have with me none other but Dileep Marway. Dileep, thank you so much for being with us. He's the head of Quality and DevSecOps at Economist. Dileep has more than 15 years of experience in the industry, and he has helped Economist from past 4 years. So back when Dileep joined Economist, he was tasked with he was tasked to build a QA team from scratch to enable test automation processes. And Dileep has been doing that with the Economist for a while now. And there you have me, Harshit Paul. I work in the product and growth side on Lambda Test. And Dileep, over to you. I'd love to, it would be great if you can give your introduction to the audience once, yeah?
Sure. So my name's Dileep Marway. Essentially, I'll talk you through sort of a journey piece, just a bit more about me so that you know where I've come from and how I've got to this point. So a bit more about me. So I studied pharmacy at Aston University in the UK. I love science, and that was sort of the mindset that I had. It was basically, I was very methodical. I very much liked experimentation, and I was very structured in my approach. So I did pharmacy for a year, completely hated it. My dad said I could change course if I basically passed, and I got over 70%. So I went one step further, got 81, and he had to hold his promise of letting me change course. So I changed to computer science after that. I'll be very honest, I hated computer science as well, but my dad didn't let me change. So I stuck with computer science for another 3 years. And then after that, essentially, I went and worked for Reynolds and Reynolds. So Reynolds and Reynolds it's an automotive software company. So think of it as BMW have a software piece to actually sell cars internally in their showrooms. We actually created that piece of software. And that's where I essentially worked as a systems tester. When I say a systems tester, it was a bit more of a technical role. Rather than looking at it from a user perspective, I was looking at it more from a configuration in the back-end perspective. So it gave me a good grounding of how important it is to actually understand your system, not just understand it from a user perspective. So I understood the end-to-end from configure the system, put it in a showroom, person buys a car, and then they're invoiced, and the invoice goes really, really well. So that was my first role. I did that for 4 years, and then I started to get twitchy feet, and I thought, I need to try something else. I actually went back on a graduate scheme. A lot of people would probably say that was a backward step at NFU Mutual, which is an insurer. Now, this was a bit of an odd role because it essentially didn't just span testing. It spanned different types of roles. So I was a software engineer. I worked in support. I worked in delivery. I worked in a management intelligence team, which was creating SQL reports. And I also worked in a test team. So I'd probably say if I was to pick one role that has defined my career, a lot of people would probably say that that would most likely be my last two roles because I've got the title. But if I'm being perfectly honest, that role at the NFU Mutual took me completely out of my comfort zone. I took a pay cut, and I'd probably say those 2 years were the most beneficial to my career because it allowed me to understand not just testing, not just quality assurance, but engineering, delivery, product. So I did that role, and the role was a bit far in the UK, and I had a rubbish car at the time. Unfortunately, my dad didn't get me a new car, so I changed role to something in Birmingham. And that's where I ended up at JHC. So JHC is a share solution. And I'd probably say that this is probably the most technical from a user perspective. So actually understanding how share platforms work. I actually took rigorous shareholder exams. I understood how to buy and sell shares inside out. And that gave me a really good, robust approach to quality assurance because it was very structured. And when I say very structured, any type of mistake or any type of defect would have a massive impact. So think of it this way: if you couldn't share trade a certain amount of shares, the impact wouldn't be hundreds of pounds. The impact would be millions or even billions at times. So this gave me a very structured approach in those 2 years. And then 2014, Signet Jewelers, very, very different, a retailer who basically sell jewelry, came to me and they said, we want to set up a test team from scratch. Are you up for it? First thing I asked was, how big is the team? Essentially, they told me the team was a team of 20. And when I went there, that was the BA team. That wasn't actually a test team. So it essentially was setting up a team from scratch. What I would say, it was a very different realm, very much till systems and backend systems. They just started their digital transformation around a website and a mobile app. But that gave me the grounding to actually incorporate QA from the start and also grow a team in an environment which is very different to where I've been before, in that there was very limited spending and I had to collaborate very extensively with store staff. So I'll go into that a bit later on in a bit more detail in terms of what I mean. But moving on from there, 2017, I got approached by The Economist. And essentially, I was tasked with insourcing the quality assurance and building a practice from scratch with quality at the forefront of everything that we do. So I've been with The Economist for 4 years now. Started off as test manager, moved over to head of testing, which is more global. And then most recently, about 5 months ago, I just got promoted to head of DevSecOps. And I also kept my QA role as well. So my team at the moment essentially spans team members in Birmingham in the UK, also team members in Gurgaon in India, and also testing partners around the world. Just to name some of the areas: Belarus, Slovakia, and I've also got some members in Hyderabad as well.
Wow. So you have shuffled a lot of different, I would say, industries when it comes to automating processes, right? Like lots of different application and, different industries all in all to work with. Great to know about you, Dileep, and I'm sure, our viewers will be thrilled to know about the experience too. And let's quickly deep dive into today's agenda and talk about everything that we'll be covering. So starting off, we'll be picking up, why QA, community of practice, should be the heart of every successful organization, right? We'll be talking about what community of practice is and why you should be, emphasize your process in a manner that, it conducts in a frequent way. Then we also have the, importance of building a continuous culture in your QA digital transformation process. We'll talk about how retail and publishing industries, are leading from the front as far as QA digital transformation is concerned. How we can use web testing approach effectively to gather vital customer feedback, and why compatibility testing should always be on QA's priority list. Key objectives of DevSecOps and the role of QA in the entire process, which, as Dileep pointed out, he has been recently appointed as the head of. And having said that, I will now pass my mic to Dileep. The stage is all yours. I will just shift to the next slide and we can go deep dive further.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll start off with why community of practice should be at the heart of a successful QA organization. So going into a new role, essentially the first thing I needed to do was try and build a community, try and build an area where people have a shared purpose and a shared interest. And that community of practice has been at the heart of everything that we've done at The Economist. And just starting off with what is a QA community of practice. So it's a group of people who collectively learn in an area of shared interest. And why would you have a community of practice? It's to improve knowledge, it's to facilitate learning, and it's to stimulate creativity. And what is a qualification of a community of practice? Firstly, the domain is one of a common interest. Secondly, the community is represented by a sharing of information and interaction. And lastly, the practice is the art of actual doing. So I'll go through some of those in terms of what I mean. So domain is one of common interest. It could be automation. It could be incorporating Test Cafe with Lambda test. It could be a performance testing tool. It could be an accessibility monitor in the CI/CD. Also, the second thing, you want to make sure that there's interaction in that community of practice. If that community of practice is just led by one person, like myself, it's not two-way. What you want is you want a different person sort of leading that meeting. And you also want different inputs. When I say different inputs, I mean diverse opinions. And I also mean challenges. So if, for instance, we started to spike a framework and that framework wasn't working because it was too flaky and the test kept failing and there were false negatives, rather than pursue that action, the community should make the decision to look at another framework. So essentially, it needs to be that there's a common interest and also you make a decision quite quickly. Lastly, the practice is the art of doing. What you don't want to do is always have presentations. You want to have pair programming. You want to sit together. You want to spike tickets together. And you essentially want to make sure that these sessions are very interactive. And you want to learn after every session what's worked well and what could have worked better.
So just to just add a question here. So how frequently do you conduct these sessions? Is there like a particular date set in the calendar, monthly calendar, where you have to go about it? Or is it more on the demand basis, whether you have something coming up where you think that you should go up and have a community of practice session?
Good question. So I'd always say that the minimum amount is you definitely want one a month, just to keep the regularity and to keep the cadence and keep that cadence going. But there may be a time where you've got a product initiative and you need to have more regular meetings. So an example may be if we were struggling to test on multiple testing devices, which were physical, and it was slowing us down from an agile perspective, it could be that we spike a tool like Lambda test, and it may be that we have more regular meetings like every week or every 2 weeks, whatever works with the team. But I wouldn't say that there's a dependency to say we must have a meeting every 2 days. I would say keep a minimum in mind and then keep an idea where you need an urgent meeting more regularly if need be.
Makes sense. So let me go to the next slide. Yeah.
Okay, so principles for building a community of practice. So first and foremost, the communities of practice should be independent of the organization structure. And what I mean by that is when I say QA community of practice, I don't just mean that QA people should attend. It essentially can be anyone in the organization. It can be people in marketing. It can be people in delivery. It can be people in product. Essentially, the diversity of opinions is essentially what you want. You want people to learn. And the advantage of that is you're taking everyone on the journey of QA. So when we say QA is everyone's responsibility, when people start coming to these sessions, they'll start caring a bit more, if that makes sense. Another example is it doesn't just have to be a QA community of practice. It may be that any DevSecOps professionals want to set one up themselves and anyone can attend. Product members want to set them up and anyone else can attend. So it can be that you have information in different areas, but it upskills people in different areas. So an example for me is I know that I've taken on this new DevSecOps role, but I was already attending those DevSecOps COP before. So I had a common interest already before that session. Next one is are based on topics, not assignments. So assignments should basically go into your agile process. Topics are more of a community of practice aspect. So when I say a topic could be accessibility. A topic could be performance. A topic could be penetration testing, for instance. Memberships should be voluntary. That's an important one, because if people are forced to come and they don't want to come to the sessions, essentially what you'll find is people don't enjoy the sessions and you won't get buy-in. So you may have a high turnout first and then it just gets lower and lower. They should span boundaries, so cross functions, organizations, and geographic locations. Again, as I mentioned before, they're open to anyone in the organization. They should start with a broad scope and then spin off into smaller ones. So if we use, say, automation as an example, we may start off with automation, but then we may be more specific to say we want to spike this framework because it integrates with this particular aspect from a partner perspective. The tips to actually running a successful QA community of practice, or any community of practice, is have the right culture and behaviors. And I'll touch on what those are shortly. Have a very strong mission statement, because with a strong mission statement, you'll get more people to attend. And also there's a transparency on decisions. So if there are decisions made in that, for instance, we're not using this performance testing tool because it's not great and it's very hard to configure, we want to use this one, there should be a clear transparency on those decisions and they should be logged. If they are logged for a purpose, there should be minutes and actions, and those should go into your agile processes. Thank you. So this was really important when we actually set up our community of practice initially. First session, we did a brainstorming session to actually say what are our values. And this was great because essentially it's not just the values that you want to instill in your community of practice or your COP. These can actually roll up into the values that you want for your QA department, the values that you want for your technology organization, and then also the values that you want for your company. So essentially, you're spanning them bottom up rather than spanning them top down. If your company values are top down, I'm sure a CEO or a C-suite member would be more than happy to meet halfway if there's proof that these values work. So some of the values that work for us is a quality first approach, making sure that we're trustworthy. So making sure that we can rely on each other, being loyal to each other, being respectful, being humorous, being proactive, over communication. And I say over communication because it's very key when you initially set up the COP. If people under communicate and make decisions themselves, there will always be a massive issue, because when you set up the practice, you always have to over communicate. Gratitude. So if somebody spikes a framework or if somebody finds something out, it's always good to thank people, because somebody thanking you in turn will mean that you'd help each other out. Having the courage, and when I say courage, I mean actually challenging decisions. So if something isn't working in these COPs, if they're too regular, if there's no outcome, if they're too presentation based, somebody should have the courage to actually say that. But criticism should be constructive. It shouldn't be destructive, if that makes sense. Making sure that you're collaborative. So come to the sessions with an open mind, and come to the sessions with I want to get something out of it from an objective perspective. Making sure that you're a team player, so working together, and then making sure that you're honest with each other. So moving on to the importance of continuous building of QA digital transformation culture. So this is very key in terms of setting up a QA practice from scratch, but it could also be useful to people who already have a QA practice and they want to go quicker, but they want to go quicker with the quality still being right. So firstly, QA is everyone's responsibility, and this is an important one. And this is probably the first mission statement that I started with when I built the practice. The main reason being, what I found when I essentially went into this role was things were being thrown over the fence to QA. And then all that would happen is we'd throw it back. And then essentially we'd just go through a constant cycle, and there was a lack of respect for each other. So actually saying to people that we should all care about quality assurance, if we have an escape defect, it's not just QA's responsibility, it's everyone in the team's responsibility to help each other out. Because essentially, if we're creating a product, quality is at the forefront of what a customer expects, and we should all care about that. Also, quality is not only manual testing, so get involved at the code level, put the engineer back into QA engineer. So this is an important one for me, because essentially if QA members can pair with engineers and they can actually look at the pull requests, actually understand them, actually look at what's coming to them when they QA, essentially that will make a massive difference to the time that they QA, because they understand what's coming, they know what to test, and also they'll have a better understanding of what they're testing. The next one is shifting testing left. So this is a big one, and it's in the ISTQB book, and they reiterate it many times. Defects cheaper when found earlier. And the main reason for that is getting involved earlier. It's easier to fix. It's easier to look at pull requests, and it will make everyone's life easier in the team if this is done as early as possible. Next one is prevention rather than detection. So I started to see this early in my career, and I had this symptom. So I remember when I worked for the car software company, I remember when someone said to me, "Can you test this software?" The first thing I did was, I thought, if I found 200 defects in my first day, I thought, I'll be a star of the team. What I've learned over time is it can get very monotonous and very, very tedious to keep finding defects all the time. So as I've gone through my career, as I've understood engineering, as I've understood different principles, I've started to think about prevention rather than detection. So as an example, if I keep finding the same defect, I would pair with an engineer and actually say, why do we keep finding this defect again? Is there anything that we can do from a code perspective to make sure that it doesn't come back? Because I've found the same defect 6 times now. It's not cost effective. And also as a team, we need to work better so that we can improve our code quality and improve the quality of our product. So that's more of a learning, but I think it was an important learning from the start, and it helped to improve the team. Automate repetitive tasks. Again, very, very important. I mentioned this to Harshit the other day, and what I said was, whenever you have a test pack and you can get in a routine that you just feel that you need to keep running that test pack over and over again. So I've had one sprint, I've run 50 test cases, sprint's done. I've now gone into sprint 2. I'm running those test cases again. I've now gone into sprint 3. I'm doing exactly the same again. The key aspect here is think about when to automate and keep thinking regularly about that task. If you don't think about that task, essentially it will become in your muscle memory to just keep running things manually. So I always said to my team, can we automate any repetitive tasks? And I kept asking that question to them. And then essentially the team started to ask that to themselves. And what I found in the sprints was, initially we didn't have many automation tickets in sprints, but it started to ramp up a bit like a graph curving up. And it all came from that mission statement of automating repetitive tasks. Next one is maintaining your test cases. Probably the bane of my life was, I remember I wrote loads of test cases in a test repository, kept running them. And then I got 4 months down the line And I essentially found that none of those test cases worked because the product had changed and I hadn't kept those test cases up to date. So I always say to people, make small amounts of time in it every sprint, at least 10% to review your test cases from a product perspective. And it will save that heartache of one time when you look at the test cases and then you need to invest 2 weeks of work to update them. So maintaining your test cases is key. And then the big one for me most recently, and I'd say in the past year, is data is your guide. And what I mean by data being your guide is start off with escape defects. So what type of escape defects have escaped? And then work out how good your quality processes are, and then work out where to invest your time. Data always is very key, not only from a QA perspective, but in this DevSecOps role that I've been doing, data is my guide. Also, data driving upwards is very key, because if I wanted something from my CTO or CEO, the first thing that would help them make that decision is data. So data not only helps in your QA role, but it will help in your, I'd probably say, life overall. So I've just bought a house. Data has essentially been my guide. Without that data, I probably wouldn't have this new house. So data is very, very important.
Definitely. So I actually, as you touched upon the part where you said that, QAs have to be involved at code level. I actually happened to read, came across a read which talked about, involving QA into the code review process, right? So what do you think, because many companies, they feel that, it might not be as relevant to, as a part of, since QAs are usually handed the things towards the end, right after they come out of the development side of it. So what would be your recommendation? Do you think that QA should be a part of the cycle right from the solution designing, where developers are brainstorming as to how the code should be written, rather than just monitoring the pull requests once they do it?
I think it's important in an agile company, if there's investment and if you've taken the team on enough of a journey to justify the value of it. But what I would say is the simplest form for QA members, if you can't get involved in these meetings, or if you can't get involved at the pull request level, is just ask the right questions. An example of that is, I've looked at this ticket, you're going to engineer this, but what does that mean from a user perspective? A simple one is just making sure that acceptance criteria is there. So I think there's ways around it, Harshit. I think this is what worked for the organization that I'm in at the moment. If I go back and look at when I was working in retail, the simplest form wasn't to actually look at the code. The simplest form was to ask the right questions and to also get involved with a ticket and make sure the acceptance criteria was very clear. So as an example, BDD acceptance criteria is always very clear and helpful. Given that I'm a user, when I do this, then this happens. That's a simple thing that will make a massive difference to the team. So this is an example of what's worked for me right now. But if I went to an organization where it wasn't as mature after 4 years, because it has taken 4 years to get to this point, I would probably say start with the basics, start with the building blocks first, but you don't have to specifically use this to actually make it work.
Got it. Makes sense.
Okay, so I'll talk a bit about how retail and publishing industries are leading from the front, from a QA digital transformation perspective. And this is my personal opinion. It might be different for other people working in retail and publishing, because it's very diverse and every company is different. So the first thing I've noticed is customer is king and the customer is key to the testing approach taken. So if I look at retail, for instance, the way that the customer actually collaborates and buys a piece of jewelry is very different to somebody who reads an Economist paper that is basically printed and put through their doorstep, for instance. So very different approach. I think the key thing for me is do understand your user, do understand your customer, and do understand your product. If I look at the EPOS till testing, for instance, one thing that I touched on before was when I was in retail, there was more limitations around the amount of money that we actually invested into technology. So having such a small test team, I had two options. Number one was say, this isn't great, I'm not very happy. Number two was actually to look at the risk and actually mitigate that risk. So my risk at the time was low investment, small test team, and also we did have defects. We did have problems with our systems. So the way I approached this was I actually worked out, look at the store staff. I worked out that there were, say, 76 stores. And whenever we had a live deployment, we needed somebody to come into the store, actually turn the till on, put in a code so that the till could update. What I worked out was I could actually train that user in basic testing principles and use that user as my user acceptance testing team. And then essentially get every store to actually test. And if everything went well, we would then deploy. So that's an example of trying to make the best of a situation that doesn't look great. But I would always say to people, think outside the box, work out a situation, look at the risk, try and mitigate the risk. Publishing, as I said before, it's very key to understand your users. And I would also always recommend to testing professionals or anyone in the team to actually understand your products. So use your products. If it's a mobile app, pretend you're a user. If it's a website, pretend you're using the website. If it's a purchasing platform, go ahead and purchase. Would you be proud if you gave this to your family member and they used it? Would you be proud of that? If you're not proud, then raise it with your company. You should care about the product as if you were creating it yourself. Given the push to digital, obviously there's more push now towards mobile apps and also websites. So understanding these platforms, testing them, having clear test approaches, understanding the automation products that work across both, also understanding the performance approaches to both is very, very key. Another aspect which is very, very important. I'm not a big fan of the word non-functional because I think it discounts the importance of how important these aspects are. But if you think about things like performance, very, very key. If I was on a mobile device and I wanted to buy something on a website, I'll be very honest, if it was very slow and it was laggy, I would probably go to a competitor if they had a website or an app which was basically fast. Second thing is security, very, very key. Moving into the DevSecOps role, I've seen numerous articles, numerous aspects talking about security leaks, patches that have gone wrong, and the importance of security from the forefront is probably the most important thing. So I would always say to a team, whenever you architecture a solution, if you can architecture with security in mind at the heart of everything that you do, that will be better. And it follows the same approach of shifting QA left. You're essentially shifting security left. Accessibility, very, very key. I would say the diversity of users should be at the heart of everything that you do for a web app and also a website. So I'd always say that have a look and understand accessibility. Have a look at what WCAG means. Have a look at what A means, AA, AAA, and essentially understand your users, because there's been some very high profile cases in America now where essentially companies are being sued because their products aren't accessible. It is discrimination, and people should care about how accessible their products are. So if you look at the solutions that you're working on right now, if you don't know how accessible your products are, do ask your companies, do care about accessibility. These users should be cared about essentially. So a web-based testing approach to gather vital customer feedback. So first things first, it's key to have a clear testing approach. We need to know what we're testing and why we're testing it. And essentially, everyone in the team should have access to this testing approach so that they can understand how that we test something. And this document can be shared, it can be on Confluence, and it should be updated regularly so that we understand what we're testing. Now, this isn't a once-in-time document. it should be regularly updated. So I always ask my team, what is your test approach? When did it last change? And why has it changed? Key to that is understanding our customer. So when I mentioned performance before, security and accessibility, I wouldn't recommend just running performance unless you know what your objectives are and also understand what good performance actually looks like. So as an example, in retail, when it was Black Friday, I remember the time where I asked the question, what does good performance look like? And people said, we don't know. My answer to that was, why do I want to run a performance test for X amount of users if I don't know how many users come on a good day? So we established what was our peak. Once we hit our peak, because I was overly cautious, I tripled the amount of users. And we were one of the only companies that managed to stay afloat on Black Friday because I tripled it rather than doubling it. So I got the investment from my seniors and I tripled it, and we were the only company that was still going. So we actually made a good amount of money because as a jeweler, people could still buy on Black Friday, whereas our competitors, people couldn't, essentially. How do we know that our site is secure? And are we hitting the standards that we imply? So if we asked a question that we want to be AAA compliant against WCAG 2.1, we should have proof of this. And essentially, we could put a little banner on our website to say that we are compliant to this standard. How we undertaking, and testing key customer journeys is always very, very key. How are we ensuring that previously working functionality is still working? So that's your regression testing. Where are we storing our test scripts? So I always say to people, don't just automate for the sake of automating. Go on a journey that you have your manual tests, you understand them, you understand the product, and then you have a roadmap to actually say, this is what we're automating and why. Without storing your test script somewhere, it's very hard to take people on that journey. That again implies with the next statement, what are we automating and why? And then the last one, are we running our tests via CI/CD? So with this DevSecOps role, I've understood the importance of a very, very strong, very robust, very secure, very reliable CI/CD, because it's no good having a great tests, but if you're not running them regularly, getting fast feedback, or having those tests running in a CI/CD which is stable, it's a very important part of your automation framework. Okay, so compatibility, I'll just have some water before I continue. 1 second.
Sure.
So why should compatibility testing be on a QA person's priority list? So as everyone knows, there's been a massive increase over the years in the amount of different permutations for iOS and Android devices. I myself, I'm struggling to keep up myself. I always want a new mobile phone. They come out so regularly, it's very, very hard. So if we think about a product like a mobile app or even a website, it's very hard for a tester or a QA professional to actually keep up, to actually test on the amount of devices. The first thing that I'd always recommend is understand your customer base, understand what your users are using. And then from there, you can make a strategy for compatibility testing. I'll be very, very surprised if that data comes back with saying that all of our users use one device. If that happens, I would probably say that your data is wrong. So if everyone's got an iPhone X, for instance, something's not quite right. The importance of actually having the website or the app work on those devices is very key. So if something doesn't work, you'll have frustrated customers, it tarnishes the brand image, and ultimately, I'll be honest, if something didn't work on my phone, I wouldn't use that app again, and I wouldn't probably go on that website again. We all lead busy lives. We all want to be in a situation where something is easy, something happens in seconds, not minutes or not hours in some cases. So as I said before, first and foremost, you need to understand your customers and get some data. So what browsers are our customers using? What device and operating systems do our customers have? And then also the last one is more of a learning, and I feel people miss this one. Look at service incidents. So look at incidents that are hitting our customers and actually look at customer service complaints and then work out whether we've got the right data and whether we're testing on the right devices. So that for me was quite key when I worked in an insurance company, because I actually worked in customer services. I actually sat there and I worked in complaints for a week, and that improved my QA principles and made me understand the process a bit better. So do keep close collaboration with the service delivery team and also the customer service team.
Absolutely agree to that part, because as you pointed out, it's all about having a data oriented approach to testing, and you need to thoroughly look into your web analytics tool and figure out which browsers, operating system, or devices are getting you the majority of your web traffic, and start your priority list from there. So it's all about, because you can't just go out, there's so much to test, you can't just go out and take a stroll in random, and you need to have a thorough plan ready with you. And definitely knowing which browsers and operating systems have a major share of your web traffic definitely helps to align that strategy. Yeah. So
moving forward. So firstly, as I said before, make sure that there's a testing approach there, but make sure that compatibility is highlighted in there. What you don't want as a test approach, and you don't mention this because it is really, really important. So the options that you've got, once you understand your users, and think of it this way, you may have a list of 10 iOS devices, and then a list of 10 Android devices and 2 tablets, one on iOS, one on Android. First approach could be manually purchase those devices. The disadvantage to this approach is it costs a lot. There's an admin, there's a maintenance piece, and then also you probably will have to keep getting these devices nonstop. Second alternative, and this is one that I've pushed towards because I've got fed up of all the admin that I've had to put in myself, it's to use a cloud-based testing tool. And my personal favorite, and this is me personally, not tied to any of my roles, is Lambda Test. And the main reason for me why I've enjoyed using Lambda Test, the devices are highly available. So they've always been there. If they're not going to be there, there's been a clear status screen saying your devices are available and this is why, and this is when it will be back. So that's been great. Next one is actually the speed. So actually using the devices, it's been quick. I haven't had any performance issues, so that's been good for me. Next one is the latest devices are available. So one thing for me, it's very hard to keep up in the industry and actually see this device is now available. I like the fact that I'm being told by Lambda Test that this device is now available. So that takes a bit of admin off me, a bit of stress off the team. And then also it's very easy to configure via an automation suite. So I'll be very honest, I haven't touched code for some time. I am very rusty. And if you saw me touching code, you'd probably have a heart attack. So actually being able to configure this easily is very good. So as an example, so I think Doug has just mentioned it, we use Test Cafe. So we write our tests in JavaScript and TypeScript, and we can integrate with Lambda Test very easily. And we can just basically update one line of code, and I'll let Harshit get to this when it comes to his part. But yeah, for me, it's been very, very easy.
Now, just like to extend thanks from me and the entire team, Dileep, because ever since we started, our co-founders, they have emphasized entirely, all the time that we have to focus rigorously on how we could solve problems for our customers. And as you mentioned about looking into service complaints, and that's pretty much has been a standard drill for us, because we as a platform have always tried to eliminate the friction that comes into testing processes and make it as convenient as possible for our brand ambassadors such as you. And thanks to power users such as you who have given us such constructive feedback that has actually enabled us to build a platform where we are actually proud of what we're doing here. So thank you so much. Those words, they mean a lot to us, and definitely to my developer team as well and the entire staff. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So just to answer Guggen's question while I see it. So Test Cafe is your automation framework. And then Lambda Test basically integrates with Task Cafe so that you can basically run your compatibility tests in the cloud.
Yeah, and just to add on, so Lambda Test is more or less, we provide a cloud-based execution platform where you can come up and run your Selenium scripts using any compatible framework, automation testing scripts in generic, Selenium, be it Cypress, or any framework that is that supports Selenium. We allow you infrastructure at scale where you can come in, plug your automation testing scripts, and have it executed over ready-to-fire machines over cloud-based infrastructure. So.
Perfect. So talking a bit about the role that I've been doing most recently. So key objectives of DevSecOps and the role of QA in the entire process. So the key aspect around DevSecOps is cultural transformation, making sure that you've got the right culture. And the reason why I've enjoyed this role so much is culture is at the heart of my QA formation in the team anyway. So actually taking on this role, it's felt no different, if I'm being honest. It's just a different objective. But the cultural transformation can be key to any organization. So first thing with DevSecOps is keeping pace with demands and agile processes. The key aspect is everyone wants a faster time to market and lead time. Everyone wants an improved deployment frequency. Everyone wants a better team culture. And everyone wants increased collaboration across teams. So DevSecOps is at the heart of all of that. And they're the key reasons why DevSecOps principles actually exist. Key objectives for me, and essentially these are key objectives that I would push in a DevSecOps team. It's making sure that we increase the availability of our products. So if I've got a mobile app, it's available 24/7 rather than certain points of a day. If it goes down, that's not great to a customer. Increasing the performance of our products. I won't bore you because I've talked about a lot of performance examples already, but if anyone wants any more, I can give more in the Q&A. Increasing the velocity at which we deliver changes. So this is a very important one for me. What I've found with DevSecOps principles is the quicker you release and also the faster failure rate is better, because imagine it this way. If we were deploying every 3 days and we had a massive failure after 3 days, we're better off deploying in shorter intervals and finding that failure quicker rather than leaving it after 3 days. So increasing the velocity is good because you fail fast, but then also you learn more quickly. So that's super important. Improving the quality of our changes. QA, that's QA in a tin. That's the key one, and that's how we built our practice. Reducing the technology costs we incur, very, very key to any organization, and a CEO or a finance department would be your best friend if you thought about money, because it is important. Increasing the accessibility of our products, mentioned that one before, but I wanted to make it one of our key objectives just so that everybody cared about it. I always say if there's something that works in one team, it normally becomes contagious in other teams if you sell it in the right way. And accessibility has been one of those for me in the past few years, that I have sold it. I have pushed it in a community of practice and shared channel. I've spoke about it, I've shared articles, and it's sort of a bit like osmosis. It has basically grown. Reducing security vulnerabilities, so it's the sec part of DevSecOps, super important. And it's probably the one aspect at the moment that CIOs and CTOs care most about, because security is becoming more and more important, rightly so, because it's becoming more mainstream. It's more in the news now. So a big push towards reducing security vulnerabilities. In terms of QA involvement in that, QA is a part of all those objectives. If a QA team isn't working with their DevSecOps team, I would say something isn't quite right. I would also always say, if you don't know what a DevSecOps team does in your organization, just ask them. Just ask to pair with them. Maybe even ask them, do you want to set up a community of practice and can we attend? And I hope the answer is yes. and you'll learn together. So QA should be involved, and QA should be at the heart of both stages, both DevSecOps and QA essentially anyway.
That makes a great point. So you have actually seen, how you have migrated your role from a QA, you have transitioned into a DevSecOps sector. And you mentioned that, it's the culture is something that you were always driven for. And is there anything particular that you would like to share with us, something related to any experience that you felt that this is how, one of these key objectives, they have helped you implement DevSecOps, something that we would love to hear from your end, any particular story, notorious one, or in chapter?
I think the key thing for me is just thinking about improvement all the time. And if you recommend something, essentially you can make a sell from some of these objectives. So as an example, if you've got a firewall and that firewall isn't working, sell it in such a way and move to a different product in such a way that it actually works against these objectives. So if we change the firewall, does it mean that the performance improves? Does it mean that our website is more available? Does it mean that the costs are lower? Does it mean that we have less security vulnerabilities? So when you sell something, you can do it in such a way and you can do it in such a language that the language is consistent between departments. So whether it's DevSecOps or QA, you can consistently speak in the right language. And you could also apply these objectives across different teams, engineering. You could also apply them across product to an extent. It just may be a bit more user language focused, but essentially you can do it in that way. So if you think about compatibility, for instance, you could look at things like cost. You could look at things like performance. You could look at things like velocity, and you could look at things like availability. So it's the right language, but essentially the principles are very much the same across disciplines.
Makes sense. Thank you. So that's my cue. And thank you so much, Dileep. So for setting the base for me on many of these things. So we already talked about how important it is for you to deliver a seamless experience to your customers and making sure that you're not missing out on any browser, OS, or particular system, right? But it's all the more challenging too, because you can't just go ahead and buy every device that is out there. It's gonna leave your pockets empty, and it's not feasible for everyone, right? And even if say you have every device, it's not it's not going to be feasible for two of your members to perform the testing over a single device for a similar test case, right? So in case you want to run multiple test cases over a single device, you will actually have to wait for that particular browser, operating system, or the device or machine to be free, and that can actually delay create a delay in your test cycles, because there's so much that needs to be tested, right? And that is exactly where we as an infrastructure provider comes into play. So at Lambda Test, we offer a cross-browser testing cloud, and it enables you to pretty much come up and test your website, web app, or mobile applications on the cloud over a variety of browsers, operating systems, and mobile devices. So in many cases where, say, for example, you have a Windows on you and you want to test on Safari browsers, or if you have a Mac system on you and you want to test on Internet Explorer, it's not going to be feasible for you to do that. It's not going to be possible. But if you have Lambda Test, you can pretty much come up, just enter your URL over there in our platform, and just open the ready to fire machines and test your website in there. So what we offer at this point, we cater Selenium and Cypress automation testing on the go. So you can pretty much plug your Selenium and Cypress automation testing scripts right to a cloud-based infrastructure, and you can have your scripts running over our platform. We also offer live testing, where you can come up and manually interact with the machine and see how your website, web app, or mobile application is behaving. We have a very developer-friendly dedicated browser, which is called LT browser. And what that does is it will allow you to perform, build responsive web apps on the go, right? So you can actually compare two different devices and see how your website is looking on them side by side. And we also have screenshot testing, which allows you to come up and generate full page screenshots of your product over a variety of browsers and operating systems, and similarly mobile viewports. We have around 2,000 plus browsers. We are trusted by 500,000 users across the globe. hundreds of product integrations to make sure that your product release cycles are moving as fast as possible. 24/7 technical support. We love to hear from you and we love to help. So we have our experts sitting throughout the day and night, in fact, to make sure that any question or any query that comes our way, we do our best to resolve them. And you get lifetime product access. So in case you have not already signed up on Lambda Test, by all means, go ahead and explore it. I will just quickly go up and open it in the browser so everybody can get a gist of what I'm talking about here. So this is what the platform would look like. This, as I said, is live interactive testing. You can come up and choose from a variety of browsers. And what's interesting is that you can actually choose from from latest to legacy browser versions. And you can check how your web application or website is behaving. All you need to do is hit the start button and select a particular screen resolution, and that's it. The website will get loaded. It'll just take a couple seconds, and that's as easy as it gets. And you have a device here which opens that URL into a machine which we selected earlier, right? And you can come up and test how your website or web app is behaving in that case. And pretty much you can screen record, and you can look into the gallery in case you record it. In case you come across any bug, you can pretty much mark that from here and report it. So this is on the live testing side of it. This is one side where we make help of. Other part is the automation testing. As we talked about, we are compatible with Selenium and Cypress scripts. And the advantage of using Lambda test is that you get a detailed analysis on the logs, automation logs. We offer a variety of logs for you to go ahead and debug in case some things do go wrong, which in most cases, as we do know, as automation experts, things happen to go a little south, right? So you come up and you can pretty much check the entire video recording of the script. And that way you'll be able to, it works as a proof of concept, because sometimes you get into those debated topics where, as a QA, you're trying to make a point that it is breaking for me, whereas, you get a counter statement from the development side, which says that, it's not working for me, and vice versa. As Dileep also pointed out, we have to behave in a mutually, we have to respect both the professions, QA and devs. So once you have a video as handy as this, the debate points of debate, they margin down to pretty much minimal to none. There's also exceptions that you get in case something go wrong while you're executing on the console side of things or from your IDE. Those exceptions will get loaded over here. In this case, my test case was passed successfully, so I don't have anything here. We also have command logs where you can come up and actually interact and figure out how every automation testing command is getting executed, and you get a screenshot generated, and you can mark a bug from here as well for each and every command, wherever the ambiguity is. And then so network logs are also being captured. It is not a part of this set because the capability, as I said, was not passed as true. Speaking of capabilities, we offer a capability generator here, which allows you to pretty much come up and decide which browser and operating system you need to run your test upon. This is pretty much point and click. Wherever you want to run your test, you can select the device from here. These are, if you want to run it on an older Selenium version, you can decide from here. You can even select a particular country, which is important for, especially if you're a retail company or even as a publishing company who's, providing to a global audience. It's important to figure out, how your website or web app or mobile application, for instance, is behaving from different geographies and different GeoIPs. You can come up and pretty much come up and once you enable the network logs from here, this would actually be loaded. And let me see if I have a test where I can actually go ahead and show you how that would look like. I hope it's here. Yeah, so no. So for example, as of now, it looks like I don't have a test where the network capabilities were passed correctly. But anyways, you can go ahead and do that and figure out for yourself how that looks like. We also have raw Selenium logs, which help you to pretty much come up and see what's happening inside the Selenium scripts. And of course, there's metadata, which allows you to figure out, which browser, which operating system, what was the build name and test ID, and every single detail that there is to a particular test, right? So we have analytics to empower, monitoring side of things. So you can come up and figure out how many tests were executed over a particular time period. And you can figure that out over here. You can narrow that down by a build view or by a test view. And there's a lot more to Lambda test. I'll let you guys explore once you sign up to the product. It's free to sign up and free to use. We have a freemium plan which can allow you to give, which will give you 100 minutes of automation testing apart from the access of the entire platform too. I also touch base briefly upon the screenshot testing. This is the module where you can actually come up and test your particular website or web app over a variety of browsers and operating systems. This will generate you full page screenshots. And as I talked about LT browser, this is an amazing utility. It's free of use. You can download it, and what it does is it can actually give you a side-by-side comparison on how your website is looking across different devices at the same time. So having said that, that's pretty much, I would like to go on more about the platform, but I'm just being mindful of the time here. And you, by all means, can come up and explore the platform by yourself. I'm so sorry. I guess I stopped sharing. I'll just share the screen again. Is my screen visible, Dileep?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see
awesome.
it.
So having said that, that was pretty much into the platform. As I pointed out, we have 100 minutes of automation testing absolutely upon us. So by all means, come on board and give us a shout and let us know in case we are up for feedbacks at any point. In case you have any suggestions coming our way, we'll be happy to hear. So that was it from my end. Dileep, I think we should step into Q&A. And would you like to add something else before we do that?
No, it's perfect. Perfect. Just wanted to say I'm more than happy to take any questions. So yeah, feel free to ask away.
Got it. So I have this question which talks about anything for mobile app testing. Yes, so I will, as I'm already sharing my screen, I'll just go ahead and I'll go into the platform again. So if you go into the real-time testing, which allows you to test your websites manually, we have a tab for app testing where you can pretty much come up, upload your applications, and you can get to test them over a variety of Android and iOS devices. So there is this toggle for iOS. You can pretty much come up and figure that out for yourself. In case you have something which is under development, you can leverage on our tunnel capability, so basically it's a binary file which gets downloaded, and it will help you plug in your local host to our cloud-based servers. So if there's anything that you're testing which is not yet made live on the production side, you can pretty much go ahead and see how it would look beforehand in case you want to have that kind of checks. So Shannon is agreeing to the presentation, Dileep, and it says that I feel confident our product teams are on the right path after hearing all of this great info and tips. So that's the applaud coming your way.
That's nice to hear. And thanks, Paul, as well. Thank you very much.
And we have Aaron who says, I work for a marketing agency. We are growing our internal process to leverage better QA and improve time to lead. At what point in DevSecOps cycles does your creative team get involved?
It's a good question. So first thing I saw when I started to look at this role was actually the DevSecOps team was probably getting involved too late. So I'd say the big process that we've had at the moment is making sure that we have a clear product roadmap and making sure that all the disciplines are involved in that product roadmap at the right time. And when I say the right time, I mean at the same time, because essentially, if DevSecOps got involved too early or they got involved too late, essentially there's a mismatch between the way that everyone's working together. So as an example, everyone in the organization that I'm working with right now knows what the DevSecOps roadmap looks like, and it should be vice versa for the other team. So my recommendation is communicate as much as possible at the start, and essentially make sure that you leverage getting people on the same side as early as possible. Hopefully that helped you, Aaron.
I hope that answers the question. We also had this question, while we were talking about code review and integrating QA under that process, right? So Gagan had a question which said, code review again is challenging because, it depends, which languages are being used, because there's so many tech stacks available, right? And definitely white box is important, no doubt about that. But how do you go about achieving
I think the first thing for me is it can be very difficult based on where the organization is from a QA transformation perspective. So I'd say rather than diving in and saying, we need to look at the code and you're not allowing us to do it, start off with the basics. I would probably just ask simple questions like, can I just have a look at the pull requests? Even when you have a pull request, rather than looking at the code, there should still be clear descriptions on what they've tested, why have they tested, and what is the outcome. So start off just asking questions. As you ask more questions, your knowledge will grow in time. So it's not always about you have to know code. You have to be great at JavaScript. You have to be great at .NET. It can just be asking the right questions. So from me, starting off in my career, I really struggled initially when I was coding. But what I found is as I asked more questions and as I became more vocal, that code and the questions actually made sense in unison in my brain, if that makes sense. So I'd say just start off with the questions and then things will tie in over time. If you don't get time to actually look at the code, that's fine, but you've still added value by asking questions.
Makes sense. So we have questions around in the Q&A, which says anything that support testing with data fetch from different databases. So would you like to go ahead and just suggest what do you think around this question?
So it's not something that I've actually used, to be honest. If I probably was working for my insurance company about 10 years ago, if Lambda test existed at the time, I probably would be able to answer it. But I think for me, if you're saying databases, I think I'd say have a look at the integration from an API perspective. That's the thing that comes to my mind. But maybe that's one Harshit that you take away and ask internally at Lambda test.
Yeah, definitely. So Gagan, maybe you can, you can reach out to us on the chat itself and, probably elaborate on that scenario, what you're trying to achieve here, and we can help devise a solution to the best of, our abilities. We do have APIs, Selenium APIs open. I will just, if my screen is already visible, I'll just try to, exit from the PPT once and I'll just show that. So you can pretty much come up and let me just go to the automation tab once. So we have APIs which will help you pretty much, and this is how enterprises make the most of our platform. They go ahead and leverage our Selenium APIs to basically run tests and even delete complex and huge builds directly from their API tools without even logging into the platform. So you can pretty much come up and manipulate anything that is available on the platform, be it around tunnel, platform pre-run files, pretty much anything. And as we touched on the performance side, we also have Lighthouse metrics, which will allow you to get the performance statistics, and you can figure that out, how your web app is performing, and you can get performance statistics too, along with the automation scripts. So I hope that answers. And then Himvardhan has, do we maintain sessions also here in Lambda test? So I'm not really sure as to what we're trying to implement here, but what was the question? Excuse me, Himvardhan, if I'm not able to get that clearly. But yes, you can pretty much come up and run your script, and we have sessions. So we do store data on the platform for 60 days, and your data is going to be with us based on every session that you have conducted. We have a time-based filter that allows you to pretty much figure out and look into previous builds as well. You can come up and select an older date range and figure out which tests were executed. You can also clear out these filters or apply them. So by all means, go ahead and play around the dashboard, and I hope you'll get your queries answered. In case it does not happen, by all means, feel free to reach out on the chat. Yeah, we'll look forward to your query in detail. We're always happy to interact with our customers and power users, and definitely. So I'm glad we could help and take those questions up. We're not getting anything else right now, so I think that's going to be curtains for the time being. And can I integrate with Slack to run automation? Yes, definitely. So let me just quickly touch upon all the integrations that we have. We offer integrations with different tools, be it communication tools like Slack, Microsoft Teams, or bug tracker project management tools like Jira, Asana, Trello. We also have integrations to CI/CD, and you can pretty much leverage that to plug your automation test cases into your CI/CD pipelines in a way that it ensures that continuous testing is accelerating in the right manner. Not even that, we also have integrations with codeless automation tools like Catalyzing Studio, Ranorex, and Leapwork. So we have a lot of integrations here. Feel free to come up and test that. So I'm just a little curious. Would you like to add something here, Lilith, on how you are leveraging Lambda test and on the CI/CD side of things?
So I think at the moment we're actually using Slack. So exactly, yeah, exactly like we said before, it's pretty easy to configure anyway. And you've got a lot more than I ever thought there was. So that's definitely interesting to me.
Yeah, and we're always constantly adding more integrations here. So in case you have some recommendation for us, by all means, feel free to let us know. We'll be happy to incorporate. And I don't think we have any further questions. And I think now it's definitely curtains. So in case we have missed out on anything, and in case you have any follow-up questions, we are 24/7 available on the website. You can use the chat bot to reach out to us. I would also like to just highlight that we have a dedicated community in place where you can come up and quickly go ahead and ask your questions, and we have automation experts who will be more than happy to handle any query that you post here. So in case you have any questions at any point during any time, by all means, feel free to come up here. If you are one of the geeks who would like to be updated about ever-changing technologies and trends in the QA side of things, we have a curated newsletter called Coding Jack, and where we make sure that we deliver weekly insights into your inbox. So in case you're not already subscribed to that, make sure you do that too. And having said that, I would just like to wrap this up. And thank you so much, Dileep, for taking time out of your busy schedule again. It was a pleasure to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to having more sessions with you in the future. And it's been great hosting the entire audience. Thank you so much for tuning in from different places. I hope we've all gone through the new norm, and I hope everybody stays safe, and you and your loved ones are being taken care of. Thank you so much for joining in. Dileep, would you like to say something?
Just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you everyone for the great questions, because I've really enjoyed it. And have a nice evening, and stay safe wherever. And it's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure, everyone. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye. Happy testing.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.